I'm gonna need a whole damn bottle of wine after that little affair. Welcome everybody to WineShark Wednesday, where your computer won't cooperate because it decided not to. Anyway, yeah, so there's that. I hope everybody's having a better Wednesday than I am because that just kind of went off the rails. But I'm here now, and you're here, and everybody's here. So hooray us! Hopefully, we're getting better quality video now. We've turned the latency up so that we're not worried so much about real time because, well, there's always a delay with the streaming anyway. But now we should at least have maybe slightly crisper me. I was wondering why it wasn't shooting in better definition, but that has to do with the live stream. Anyway, so today, let's see. Let's talk about what's been going on in Wine Shark World. Um, Finished up our beer and wine show last week, which was a lot of fun down at Reunion Tower. Thank you to everybody who rescheduled with us. This was a show that was canceled due to the snow event of the previous weeks. And then we had to reschedule it again due to other things. So it got a whole delayed by 3 weeks. So thank you to everybody for sticking with us and coming out. Bob from Two Penny Beer and I had a great sense of what's going on. So anyway, yeah, that was very cool. Upcoming events, just to give you the preview, we're going to be doing Aromatic White Wines online on Friday night. Then in person, we got Reunion Tower Spring Fling featuring yours truly. Light, approachable, fun wines for the spring season coming to you live at Reunion Tower. So we've still got a few tickets left. Get a friend, grab a friend, come enjoy some wine with yours truly. And then we have Wine and Cheese Part 9 online later in the month. Plus, we're still working on other live events as situations permit. So that's kind of cool. Fun news this week. I got sent this by a friend, and then I saw another article in online that reminded me to bring this to you guys. But that is, you guys have heard me talk about fake wines before, right? We talk about counterfeits, that you may have heard. Now, normally in the counterfeiting world, it's like counterfeiting high-end paintings, right? It's usually the very pricey high end of the auction wine market. Well, this couldn't be further from that. There's some fake yellowtail showing up in England, specifically in a shopping market in Birmingham. And there were some like 40 or so bottles of this stuff found that a customer had bought like half case, about 6 bottles, and some of them didn't match the others, which caught their attention. It wasn't the same color, didn't taste the same. They brought it back, and they figured out that these were Fugazi bottles of freaking Yellowtail of all things. So, well, it doesn't make sense, like at the first thing you think, why bother? But the answer really is, believe it or not, you can make wine even cheaper than the lowest wines out there. When you talk about grocery store level wines, there's still a matter of undercutting the normal. And rather than trying to blaze your way with a brand of your own, why not sell your cheap knockoff as one of the most popular worldwide brands? So despite the kangaroo on the label, they managed to find even cheaper. So the grocery store severed their relationship with the seller, but the authorities postulate that this is criminal behavior based on organized crime, because it goes to, for those of you that are fans of The Wire, as Prop Joe would say, you buy for $1 and sell for $2 is the simple principle of business. So this is really kind of an interesting world where people are worried about even some of the major labels now, not just whether you're buying a 1946 bottle of Domaine Romany Conti or some other, something that would cost you the price of a small mansion here in Texas. So anyway, I thought it was rather both amusing. We've got that gives me a kind of a, wow, well, now we've just seen it all kind of thing. But yeah, I don't think the wine world's in such trouble that we have to start making knockoff Yellowtail. That's frightening to me. Anyway, so today's topic, we're talking about wine chemistry. Well, basics of wine chemistry. We're not going to get all into the funky deep stuff. In fact, a couple of things. Number one, first thing, this is about practical usage of your chemistry. Chemistry, of course, affects all of your daily life, and you really should know more, be educated. But we're going to talk about the chemistry of why some of the things taste the way that they do. That's kind of the focus of our chemistry lesson. Second, a lot of this stuff that I'm talking here has been sourced from many of the wine books that I've talked about in the fact, great online wine sources, functional scientific papers, etc. Kind of double sourced through that. So a lot of this stuff all vetted through blah blah. But there's a third caveat, and that is I'm not a chemist, but I play one in my shed or here on YouTube anyway. So you're gonna have to pardon my errors in the past, present, and/or future due to the fact that sometimes that stuff happens. But the inspiration for this was a different piece of news that I came across in another quizzical thing in the world of wine. Down in Argentina, the Huaypiza winery, which is part of the Bodega Trapiz, aged 1,500 magnums of their 2017 Malbec blend at depths of between 20 to 50 feet in the Atlantic Ocean. And they did this for 9 months. Then pulled it up and compared the wines to wines that had been in the cellar for 9 months. So they then claimed that the wines were rounder, more elegant, and with fresher fruit. And that got me kind of interested in what the heck we're talking about here, because it's kind of counterintuitive. The one would think, or rather, it seems rather odd at the very least. In fact, during one of the references in the article that I read and the one that I went further looked at is there's an Underwater Wine Congress, which is a business collective with the premise of exploring underwater winemaking, or the art of producing wine under the sea. And it's the result of this is their quote, by the way, the result of the visionary restlessness of those who foresaw a reality. Underwater wines evolve different than terrestrial ones. Very big statement. The process breaks away from the basic principles of traditional enology, creating wines that are chemically and organoleptically, is that right? Organoleptically different. Wow, that's organoleptically. That's a good word. So yeah, that's an interesting premise. The reason that it caught my attention is knowing a little bit about the way the wine comes through and ages and the process and the chemistry thereof. One of the things that wine does during its aging process is off-gassing and access to oxygen. So the off-gassing, we often having sulfur compounds that escape the wine during that aging process. And the AWRI, the Australian Wine Research Institute, which is an excellent source of industry data and real experimentation on wine topics, did a study in 2001 regarding examples of a specific wine that did a Semillon wine in 14, I believe, different variations, where they basically completely isolated it from oxygen and then tested it at 14 points along the way over this course of this something like 21-month aging. And basically really scientifically looking at what is lack of oxygen due to a wine. The fault that they're looking for here is the product we call reduction. Reduction is where sulfur compounds don't break down in the natural enzyme chains and fermentation chains that happen during wine age creation and aging, and it leaves too much sulfur behind. Leaving too much sulfur behind is bad. It comes up in off flavors. Specifically, a very rubbery or plasticky flavor was the flaw that was noted in these studies. So I wonder that they didn't give us any details about how these magnums were kept. Now there's some photos on the article that show a diver, and it's all an encrusted, crusty bottle, although it's got a brand newish label looking underneath. So 9 months at sea, we'll have some stuff cling to the bottle, and that's cool. But I really want to know what the details are here, because if they're holding, how are they sealing the bottles? For instance, are they using an oxygen tight, example, like say a Stelvin closure, or are they, and therefore capturing everything in the bottle? The benefit, of course, of being under the sea could cause the idea of a very stable temperature gradient. And the differences between 20, 40, 50 feet of, water might have different thermal variations. I'm assuming there's no pressure issue here because, well, the bottle's doing all the work there. So what are the implications? It's fascinating to me. And again, really kind of worried about, well, they only aged at 9 months. That length of time is not wildly significant in the world of wines. And the idea of it preserving fruitiness does make sense, because when you don't have oxygen in there to oxidize, and you don't have a reductive flavor problem yet, in other words, it hasn't happened enough yet in that early period of 9 months, you're avoiding the rubber problem, and you're enhancing the no oxidation problem. Think about just basically totally protecting your wine from oxygen, et cetera, to quote unquote preserve fruitiness. So I think their claim of rounder, more elegant with fresher fruit, well, elegant is a subjective issue. Fresher fruit could absolutely be a chemical process of, you're right, no oxygen, no oxidization equals fresher fruit. But once again, I really think it's more, hey, check it out, we ice our wine underwater. And that's kind of cool, because nobody's buying 1,500 magnums of Malbec anyway. But that was kind of the inspiration here for what's the deal, what's the stories, and let's talk a little bit about chemistry. I mean, I've already given you just a little snippet of some of those processes, but I wanted to talk about things in a little more kind of a formal fashion. I was also doing some practice and research on flavors and aromas, and there's a ton of chemical nomenclature that comes along with that. Now, that being said, today's show is just going to be the highlights, right? We're going to talk about a lot of words. We're not going to deep dive into where those words come in for specifics. That's the property or slash objective of some of our deeper dive wine things. We don't do that on WineShark Wednesday. Come to a full tasting, come to an online tasting. Yeah, we'll absolutely talk about some of the details. We'll really kind of get into some, because we'll have examples that go along with it, right? I really want people to lock in their memories that if I'm going to talk about pyrazines and herbaceous flavors in particular wines, well, that's cool, but let's have that wine and demonstrate. Aroma equals this, my mouth feels that, wine equals this, memory connection made, we have learned, we have achieved, awesome. So we'll do those kind of deep dives a little bit later, but we're going to talk about flavors and aromas. So some of you may have heard about a concept called aroma impact compounds. Impact compounds are something that Wine Folly has talked about. I've heard of it's a couple of other online sources, but it's a method of using when you're talking about blind tasting, we're talking about the items that are of particular chemical worth within a scope of wines, that certain types of grapes or wines have these things as identifying markers. Some of these simple things that I learned early in the process were things that were specific to that I thought were specific to regions, or were specific to certain types of grapes. And that kind of is a Venn diagram. There's a little bit of truth to both of those things. A lot, mostly to the type of grape. So for instance, Mosel Rieslings. Riesling wine, or wines made from the Riesling grapes from the Mosel region of Germany, or very often have a distinctive smell of rubber or diesel. So it's often referred to as a petroleum kind of chemical to it. In the nose. They don't taste anything like this. Once you get them in the mouth, they're all this green apple, bright floral kind of thing going on. But that particular chemical marker, that aromatic marker, was something that was easily identified. So when you're doing blind wine tasting, when you're trying to decide what grape this wine is made from, where it might be located from in the world, as specific as you can be, that comes along with these. You want to look for these hallmarks, because again, you're going through this mental database that is designed to remove what the wine isn't, to figure out what the wine is. So many of these impact compounds have brackets or groups of grapes or wine styles that will fall within them. But before we even get to that, I want you to think about flavor in threes. Two great lessons on aromatic compounds and about where they come from. The first three is where they come from. The second three is what the aromatic compounds do. The where they come from is broken into fruit, fermentation, and aging. Okay, so fruit flavors, or things that come from the fruit, are examples of floral flavors, herbal flavors, and of course, fruit descriptors. These are things that have to do with the type of grape that the wine is coming from. And so certain types of grapes yield certain flavors. Okay. Fermentation flavors. This is where wine gets its creamy, buttery, bread or yeasty or mushroomy styles of flavors. These are all products of what yeast does during its chemical interaction with sugar, and then yielding, of course, alcohol and carbon dioxide. Right, that complex thing. That's just a tough, that's just the basics of it. But there's a lot of things going on in the fermentation world. Different styles of fermentation, different chemicals being exchanged, all kinds of stuff going on. But those flavor bands, for instance, the creamy or buttery nature we've talked about many times when we talk about malolactic fermentation. Okay, that's where that style of thing comes from. So if you're detecting that buttery, creamy thing going on in your wine, you're going, this wine's been malolactically fermented. That might give you hints and stuff on where the styles that use such things, and rule out others that never use such things. Then finally, we have aging flavors, things like vanilla and cocoa and coffee and tobacco and flavors of nuts. These are often products of the way wines are breaking down and interacting in that long-term aging. Processes like reduction and oxidation and things like that. Those are things that come along with the aging process. And why wines that are fresh and new, for instance, things like our classic Beaujolais Nouveau, right, a first harvest wine, tastes very different and almost never has any of those descriptors in it, because those things come by being in contact with oak, for instance, vanilla, very common with that example, and then the other oxidization action that happens with the phenols and polyphenols within wine and all those other type of chemicals that do so by time. Okay, so those are three great things to think about when you think about the style of thing you're smelling. You might be able to associate it with where it comes from in the winemaking process. The second three, which is actually not related to the first three, it's just a way of grouping flavors together, is what the aromatics do, or what impressions they generally leave us with. And these can be broadly grouped into fruity aromatics, earthy aromatics, and spicy aromatics. Okay, this is it's a great article in Wine Folly on this that I've referenced many times and will continue to do so. There's also some great stuff from the Guild of Sommeliers. I've read a couple of professional papers, and there's a great book called Flawless that discusses flaws in wine. But in the process of discussing flaws, many of the things that become flaws are an excess of amount of the necessary things that we like in wine aromas. So flavors that derive fruity style of flavors are things like esters, pyrazines, terpenes, like geosmin, and thiols, right? These are all examples of things that drive fruit-based flavors in a group of different groups of wine. And you can dive into each one of these. Probably has 3 or 4 different fruit descriptors, or herbal descriptors, or floral descriptors. Okay, those are all the kind of things. Again, fruits, flowers, and herbs generally fall into this class of flavor profile, and they almost always come from the fruit of the one you're talking about, whatever grape varietal we are. So Grenache has certain things that are different than, say, Sauvignon Blanc. There are also some of those distinctive ones we use. We mentioned the petroleum reek from Riesling, but you guys have heard me talk about 4-MMP. We talk about the cat pee smell that we get from Sauvignon Blanc, right? For instance, that's another example of a pyrazine. That's a very specific one. So the next group, you get things that are in that kind of earthy range, right? These are things that come from sulfur compounds, volatile acidity, and we get things like other like geosmin, which is an earthy mushroom, or fresh after the rain smell. Often comes from the parts of the plants that the oils of the plants are washed into the soil, and then when they're activated again by contact with water, that's that smell that we associate in the air with that particular plant process. And again, it's a very heady smell that can be very fond in wine if done at the right level. Then we talk about things that add spiciness to wine, or the spice, or not add, but make us think of spice when it comes to wine. These are things like rotundone. This is cracked pepper type smell, or lactones. These are the things we think about when we talk about butters and creams and whatnots. Botrytis and Brettanomyces can bring along a lot of ginger or this earthy flavor, this this barnyard kind of thing going on. So those classes as well. When we think about the groups, we've referenced again the aroma wheels many times. You can actually get many of these broad groups in that class where we're talking about earthy flavors, spicy flavors, fruit flavors. So some of those chemical names are going to be some other things where if you're in that more advanced world of your wine world and you're really trying to understand how to describe aromatics and flavors and such, those are some things you're going to want to look into. This is that level. This is, you'll notice on the thumbnail for the video, it's a 3 grape video. This is an advanced video. Most of this stuff, basic wine drinkers aren't really paying attention to. They're still trying to figure out what it is about a particular wine that they like, and we're trying to educate them how to find that more often. When you really kind of deep down the rabbit hole, when you're trying to go, okay, well, I'm trying to do things blind, for instance, or if you're really kind of getting into the differentials between two wines within a particular style, you might speak to different parts of these chemical notes. Okay. Then another kind of last thing that I want to talk about, because again, in the world of chemistry, it has come up several times, is the idea of acids and the acids that are generally present within wine. We've referred to them a lot, but the acids are not only fundamental to why wine is what it is, but they come in several different styles and flavors, if you will. There's 3 primary acids that come from the fruit itself. These are things like tartaric, malic, and citric acid, and they make us think of very different flavors. Citric acid, we might immediately associate, of course, with things that are tropical fruit in nature. We think about the citrus fruits. We think about lemons and grapefruits, limes and lemons. That's pretty obvious, is that those flavor derivatives come from that acid band. Malic acid. This is the malic to lactic thing that we're going to talk about once again. Malic acids, think about like green apples. Perfect example of a malic acid is a green Granny Smith. When you take that sour bite into that sour is coming from malic acid. Tartaric acid, and then on the other hand, doesn't really have a flavor profile that we generally associate with it that I'm aware of. Though we often think of it as a leavener. When you talk about bread, we talk about cream of tartar. That's a tartaric acid blend that we used in the process of baking. So tartaric acids and malic acids account for like 90% of the acids in your wine, right? Citric acid is usually a very small percentage. Those flavor aromas, though, are something that's easily mimicked / something we easily readily identify. So understand, though, that the acids themselves aren't quite the same. Then we have 3 acids that come along in the fermentation process. Once again, changing wine from its fruit into its end product dramatically alters the chemistry in all the cool ways. And the 3 fermentation acids that we get are acetic acid, lactic acid, and succinic acid. So lactic acid, I'm going to highlight first because, again, it's something we easily identify with. Lactic acid equals things that are buttery, creamy, and cheesy. They're the byproduct of the malic to lactic fermentation chain we spoke of earlier, and they have those flavors like butters, creams, and cheeses. They produce these products that make our mouth feel creamy and feel full, feel slick. So they're, again, a very pleasant result of fermentation, and when done in the right proportions, can really enhance your wine experience, depending on what style of wine it is. Again, you may not want buttery styles of certain wines because those things don't work well as a flavor match in our mouth. Okay. Same thing with acetic acid. Acetic acid, we think this is our vinegary thing that we think of, but that's one of the reasons people often associate wine turning into vinegar as a natural process, as opposed to too much acetic acid, and wines get vinegary and bad. They become unpleasant to drink. But in the right amounts, under the right controls, they're part of the fermentation chain. They need to happen to make wine go its way. And succinic acid is a fairly small percentage of their all. So again, it doesn't necessarily play a direct role in our end flavor profile. However, We generally refer to all these acids and the whole type of thing. If you're looking at wine from a tech sheet perspective, you're looking at a thing called TA, or tartratable acidity. You may also just hear it referred to as total acidity, because when a wine scientist looks at a bottle of wine, they'll basically look at that wine and look at that bottle from a purpose of kind of three things: two types of volatiles and one type of everything else. The two types of volatile things are alcohols and sugars, and then they have the non-volatile, or what's called dry weight of the wine. And that, even though the thing is liquid, don't get me started on scientists. They make up things for reasons that are just, almost Italian in nature. So needless to say, the total acidity is generally referred to as that part of the, that acid portion that is totally left in the bottle. And it's a great way to compare that to the total volumes of sugars when we're talking about sugar acid balance. Okay. The other thing we talk about a lot is pH. So again, if TA is total acidity, or the volume, how much acid is within a particular amount of wine, then pH is that intensity, or an intensity level. I often use the word volume when I'm speaking casually about it, when I talk about pH, because volume to me increases in, we're talking about loudness of volume, like much. But actually, it's much more about intensity or pitch. So if the total acidity is loudness in the volume scale, which is a much more accurate way to look at it, and then you've got acidity being pH in your acidity being how keen that noise is, that's the difference between a low bass rumble and a lot of volume, like an earthquake, or the keening ping of, glass being broken. So total acidity and pH tend to work in inverse relationship, rather, when it comes to wine. Wines with high total acidity tend to have low pH, which means the overall experience is way sour because there's lots of acidity, and the low pH means, oh my goodness, it's sharp, sharp, sharp. Whereas wines that are low in overall acidity tend to be higher in pH, which means they're a more mellow overall experience. These are your red wine end of the scale, for instance, closer to the 3.9, 4.0 kind of perspective. So anyway, that's kind of your primer, right? I mean, think about aromatic compounds, think about acids. Those are two of the things that I think overall you're going to experience more in your advanced wine tasting than most other things. At least in my educational experience, that's where most of my time has been spent. Then you can get on to the concept of flaws. And we've talked about flaws in several classes before, just kind of touching on some of the big ones. And there's a great thing in that book, Flawless, that I wanted to just relate as a final note. We talk about wine flaws in the same way we talk about aromatics. There's the author. Oh, sorry, totally drawing. I didn't put his name in my notes for some damn reason. But the idea of imperfection in beauty, and the idea that this very Japanese idea of this idea that without something else to mark upon, perfection is itself not necessarily perfection, or isn't the best that you can achieve. The example was the sound of a water drop, or the silence of a water drop. How in a perfect Zen garden, if it was completely silent, you wouldn't notice anything until some tiny thing disrupted it. But it's the sound of the water that forms that awareness. So wine flaws can be a lot like that, or wine aromas can be a lot like that. Whereas just the right amount of them is beautiful, amazing, and perfect. Whereas too much or not enough can form that absence that shows wrong, or more importantly, goes over the top and becomes very unpleasant. For instance, Brettanomyces as the example, the Bretti sensation. Sometimes that kind of earthy funk, mushroomy, loamy, barnyard thing can be the subtle underpinning of a well-made wine. Whereas when it gets too much, the wines become what they call horsey. That smells too much like horse or horse manure, or even Band-Aid like flavors, right? Which that's not a pleasant aroma to anybody's sense of it. And certain people are being more sensitive to it. But overall, little, nice, lot, too much, bad. So we go from that. Anyway, so there you are, basic chemistry. We're gonna dive deep into the terpenes on Friday, by the way. So if you want to come and talk about terpenes to a little bit more extent, the aromatic white wine group, the concept of what an aromatic white wine is is actually defined by the concept of the monoterpenes within their skins of grapes. And so we get this group of grapes that have these floral aromas that come from their terpenes, hence the nickname aromatic whites. So we're going to talk more about that on Friday. So join us then. You'll get a nice deep education. We're going to try 3 different wines this week. Some nice, all of them are nice, light, white wines. And so very enjoyable and really kind of a cool study on a style of wine that I think a lot of people underappreciate. So we're going to check it out and deep dive. So with that, we shall transition to the grocery store grab. I'm sure you guys are stunned and have no questions about chemistry because everybody have already made them while the feed was broken. So. All right, but anyway, welcome to everybody, to Mark and to Barbara, to Dave and Mary, to Teach and Reba. Great to see everybody here on the show. I hope you guys are having a good week. So anyway, booze, hooray, wine. Now, for some reason, in my hurry to get things done and the breaking of this and that, I failed to get a label for this week's grocery store grab. So that's not fun, but I'll flash the bottle up here instead, and we'll go back to the old way of doing things. Anyway, the grocery store grab. For those that are not familiar, the grocery store grab is our premise is to get the best value for dollar for wines found at non-specialty and non-big box retailer. We have a label-focused approach where we do not choose the wines in advance. We let their labels do the talking for them so that any wine drinker can come up, read these things on the label, understand what's in the bottle, and enjoy the product at home. So this week's wine of the week is the Koonunga Hill Penfolds Shiraz-Cabernet. The first vintage is 1976, says so right on the label. Penfolds Wines, as also very proudly stated on the label, was established in Australia in 1844. So Penfolds is a very famous Australian name. They have the Grange, which is their like ultra top of the line, amazing Shiraz of the world. So it kind of put them on the map for that. But they have also become a worldwide and grocery store level brand. They are a name that is reliable in the wine world. And to briefly go off on topic, there are many wineries in the world who have made a process of becoming both famous and both large / well distributed. And there's some interesting views on wineries that begin with the fine wine world and then become bulk wine producers, and how sometimes that perception leads to a drop in perceived quality. I'm looking at you, Mondavi / Gallo. Despite the fact that these brands still have some brands within their portfolio that are still very high-end and premium wines. They also make grocery store wines that have the exact same, or even lesser than grocery store wines, really true bulk and cheap wines, inexpensive wines that are so, supposedly water down the brand because they have the same name. Well, Penfolds kind of had a risk of that in the same way, where they although the history of them works the other way around. Many Australian winemakers were making fortified wines and bulk sherries and stuff like that, or brandies, not sherries. Early in their career, before still table wine became a thing in Australia. So they've kind of gone the other way around, where they went from making bulk wines to making ultra premium to then also hitting somewhere along the way enough export to do good, reliable Australian examples. So this was a $14 list price. It came out at $10.50 was the final price. In other words, that's the grocery store markup that they have on their buy my club card kind of thing, or become part of our club card so we can track you for marketing purposes. The great news about that, again, in the theory behind this show, we often see this. If that gap is fairly small, you know that the winery is not trying to, or the grocery store rather, isn't trying to make you think that this wine is something it isn't. Oftentimes we'll see anywhere from 50 to 70% markup on some of these wines, where they really want to overcharge you if you don't have their club membership, which I think is kind of an odd marketing practice. But this, pretty close to its point, which we like. Lastly, we talk about the things we want to see on a wine label. What makes a label good? We want to know what's in the bottle. We want to know if it's a variety of grape, and if it's a blend, what percentage of varieties of grapes there are. We want to know where the grapes are grown. The more specific, the better. Again, if the wine is designed to be a specific place name. We want to rate that. That tells us a lot about where the wine, what its kind of prestige is. Last but never least, what does the wine taste like? This is probably the most important thing, I think, on a wine label these days is I don't really care who you are, and I don't necessarily need to know, or if I don't know what grapes are in the bottle, what does a grape taste like? Or if I don't know understand what grapes taste, what grape might taste like, please describe it for me. This is great for new to the world wine drinkers. It's how to onboard wine drinkers onto your brand and get them educated to buy your product. So flavor words are great. In fact, flavor words are mandatory in my world. Food pairings are a great other thing. That's the extra mile you can go to get really good. And by the way, when we talk about those, we want specific words, not general, both in flavor and in food pairings. So our front label, this label passed pretty darn well, and this the reason it got selected. They've got a fairly minimalist label. They've got their name, they've got their text here, and they've got what the grape is made from and where it's from. Koonunga Hill implies a specific wine growing region within their Australian wine designated origin system. So that's cool. Shiraz-Cabernet, it tells us the types of grape that are in here, although we're assuming it's Cabernet Sauvignon, simply because Cabernet Sauvignon is the most popular red grape. It isn't Cabernet Franc, but don't worry, they're going to confirm that for us. And then it's, of course, got their marketing spiel about when they were created and the year on it, which is good. But here on the back label, where the work is really done, they repeat all of the things on the front, except they get the details. Shiraz, 70%, Cabernet Sauvignon, 30%. So they're telling us the variety and they're telling us the percentage. This is good because if we like this wine, we want to be able to replicate that experience with other wines and go, I like Shiraz Cab blends, especially when they're Shiraz heavy. By the way, the Australian tradition here seems to be holding up that the first wine in the name tends to be the dominant partner in most double pairs. So when you have a Shiraz Cab, it is more Shiraz than Cab. If it was Cab Shiraz, it'd be the other way around. It might be 70-30 with Cabernet Sauvignon leading. So here on the back it says, since 1976, this wine has been, quote, a real Penfolds red, a traditional Australian blend combining the expressiveness of Shiraz with the defined structure of Cabernet Sauvignon. This full-bodied wine shows ripe, dark fruit aromas, voluminous richness, and plentiful tannins. Okay, so really they've got some descriptive flavor words here, but this is an area where we could do better. Dark fruit aromas. That goes anywhere from blackberry, blackcurrant, plum. What kind of dark fruit are we talking about here? That does a lot. Those things are distinctive and different. Although at least it's a broad class. They're at least nodding to what the deal flavors are. If we don't know, it says it's got voluminous richness, which is hopefully a word on its mouthfeel, which we hope to prove. And then plentiful tannins. Well, if you don't know what tannins are or do, the fact that they're plentiful doesn't really help me. Although, hey, it's plentiful. It must be good, right? Because they mentioned it on the label. It can't be bad, could it? Anyway, the rest of it is your basic Surgeon General and produced and bottled by information. So a little bit of a missed opportunity. I like the fact that they've got percentages here, but they didn't do a good job with flavor words. So I want to say this is maybe a C. It passes, but it could be a little bit better. Maybe a C plus because at least they gave me percents. So maybe a B minus would be real generous. Let's see how they did with the wine. So we do some basic tasting notes here. We're going to talk about whether the wine is well executed, whether it is on style, and whether it is worth its price tag. Because when it comes to the long run of things, I think for introductory wine drinkers, those three things, especially the last thing, which is it worth the price tag, which is really the bottom line to everything. But the other two, we really want to think about from a professional perspective. Being well executed, if the wine is well made, matters a lot because wines that are poorly made show poorly overall. They give us that impression that inexpensive wine is just as good as expensive wine, quote unquote. When the reality is well made is really the bottom level of this. You can have well made at the price point. It's still going to taste different than a well made at a more expensive price point, generally because you can spend more on materials. It's the get what you pay for moniker. But there are some great wines, especially in this $10 to $15 range, that we really want to explore here on the grocery store grab. So let's take a look. Color-wise, it's a nice deep garnet, almost purple here. It's Shiraz showing off there in its garnet color, like that. Very nice. Dark fruit aromas. Absolutely. I get almost, I want to say either a blueberry or a dark cherry, maybe even a red sort of plum in there, right? It's on that borderline between red and blue fruit. I don't get a lot of the black fruit notes that you would out of a usual Cabernet Sauvignon, right? I'm not getting blackberry, black currant, and it is mostly fruit on the nose. Right, what I'm getting here in that aromatics, to refer to our earlier part of the show, these are all fruit and floral flavors, right? Fruits, flowers, and herbs. This is not the, I'm not getting any aromas of fermentation. I'm not getting any really aromas of aging. And I'm not smelling vanilla or spice or oak. I'm not smelling flint or stone, right? We're not getting those things in this initial aromatic jush. So, all right, that's the aroma portion. Let's see what they do on the mouthfeel. Hmm. Okay. Well, they were correct. The plentiful tannins are there, meaning the wine has a nice grip. It's got a nice little bit of grip from both the back of your mouth all the way through to the front. Okay, so it announces its presence. It says, "Here I am. I'm wine." Okay, that starts to carry its tannic structure, and there's a little twinge of bitterness that then comes in with a solid, I want to say, you know, blue to red fruit core. This again, now it goes with that bitterness added to it. It's dark cherry, now maybe into blackberry, but the tannins are a little on the disruptive side. This is not one for those that dislike the tannic grip. This is not one for those who like a smooth kind of, the idea that this wine has voluminous richness kind of escapes me. Middle mouthfeel isn't really big and present. Doesn't have really any malolactic fermentation to soften it. The acidity is pretty bright, so we got to give it this. So if this wine is trying to remain in that bright acid category, even for a red, it does make your mouth water just a hint. But then it's fighting with its tannins, so that your mouth goes dry anyway. So the acidity is kind of lost in the background noise. Same thing for the fruit. Once you're in the mouth, the fruit is very not very, it is out of balance with its overall tannin profile, so you're getting, everything tastes like it's bitter. Oh, pardon me, apparently I didn't mute my phone. Shut up. Apparently the caller said I had 79 complimentary something brothers on there, so that was a great call that I missed. Anyway, so yeah, overall, this is an example where, is it well executed? I'm going to go ahead and say it's not flawed, but it's not what I would call a very harmonious balance choice. Too much on the tannin front, not enough on the fruit front, and what tannins it brings mucks with the fruit profile. Is it on style? I don't think so. I think that a softer style of Shiraz Cab is probably more common, but this might be a result of where we are in the price point world. The fact they're trying to compete by making this a lower priced offering might mean that their statement of being a truly Penfolds red is a little bit of an overstatement. Is it worth the price tag? I've seen better at $11. This isn't one that I would rush to repeat, and a little disappointed because Penfolds has been a name, and I've had fantastic wines from this. It's nothing against them as a winery, but their 2018 Koonunga Hill is is a little bit rough. I mean, it just needs some softening of all of its edges. Right? Give me a little malolactic to velvet glove that in. Now those are personal style choices. Again, if this is what they're aiming for and it's your jam, rock on. For me personally, this is not one that I'm going to rush to my guests and go, okay, check this out. You got to have this. It'll blow your mind. So, sadly, not what we were hoping for out of Penfolds today, but it is what it is. So. Let's see, we got a comment here. Speaking of someone that doesn't enjoy cherry fruit flavors, usually I wouldn't pick up that wine with only dark fruit as the flavor description. Yeah, exactly. That don't even really associate that with dark fruits, etc. When I think dark fruits, I think black currants, blackberries, boysenberries, black plums. So, yeah, Even on the blue fruit range, this one isn't. It's just if it could carry its aroma all the way through, if it didn't get punched down. I might also do so this one. I might just take this and decant this, let some air into it, and see if that tames it a little bit. This might be a case where right out of the bottle, it's a little too much, and it really just needs a good bit of air because, well, it's a brutish little lad, let's say that. Anyhow, if you guys have any questions, go ahead and put them in the chat there. We'll do them in just here in just a flash. Always happy to answer, whether it's whatever topic you've got. Now, again, to refresh folks that may have joined since, upcoming shows. We got Aromatic White Wines on Friday night. That's online. Tickets available on the Eventbrite, and you can find them on Facebook. You can find the Spring Fling at Reunion Tower live show Saturday evening. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm really looking forward to some of these lighter style wines. So, we've done the big survive the winter heavy things. Now it's time to lighten up and drink some Gamay and some Pinot Noir and some Rosé that are going to preview before summer. We're just going to talk about their virtues. I've got some Sicilian whites, and I've got some other springy choices. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Then, of course, Wine and Cheese 9 is coming on later in the month, which I've already got the wines. I've got a couple of, and the suggestions are up for cheeses. They're also up there on Eventbrite. So this one's going to be it's a good cheese pairing example, right? We're not hyper focused on a particular cheese topic. We're gonna just drill into the styles of cheese and their natural food partners. So it should be a lot of fun, a very laid back show. All right, well, I will give you guys a few seconds to check this out. If you guys have a chance after the show, go ahead and make those comments down there in the comments section of the video after it's live. Tell me what you know about wine chemistry, or what wine chemistry favorite things you've experienced. Is any one of those buzzwords I used in the science talk earlier, do those things make you think of, ooh, that's my jam? For instance, I like malolactically fermented reds. I like soft, velvety, roundish reds, and so something I always look for in technical descriptions of wine. But let me know what yours are. If you like what we're doing, please like and subscribe to the channel. We're hovering right around that 100 subscriber mark so that we can get our own domain name, and more importantly, so you can see me talk in a funny British accent. We apparently lost somebody along the way, so we're back to 99. We're almost there. But also share with a wine-loving friend. Again, if you like what we do here, please, share us around and see what we got going on. If you really like what you're doing, you can also follow us over on Patreon for additional content and all kinds of fun stuff. You get discounts on tickets for online shows. You get discounts on tickets on local shows. You've also got a whole repository of all the online shows we've ever done, complete with their notes, tasting notes, and everything else. Plus, we do compiled versions of the tasting notes for every month. So a handy wine guide to the stuff that we're drinking here at WineShark. So I hope that you join us there for a little slice of your money. We will gladly give you all kinds of fun value. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you for your patience regarding hard starts and the vagaries of streaming between YouTube and my computer. But I hope the quality of this video is coming out a little bit better. I thank you guys for your repeated visitage. And for those of you that are watching this later on, please drop me a comment, say hi, and we hope to see you guys soon. Until then, I have been your Wine Shark. Cheers. I think I need to get some cheese with this wine. I get some fats, some salts to tamp down these tannins, man. That's what's got to happen. Get some bread.